Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and today we are talking about used car values in November. Joining me as ever to discuss this is Cap HPI's Head of Valuations, Derren Martin. Hello, Derren.
Hi, James.
Lovely to have you on, Derren, as always. Right, let's just get stuck into it then, shall we? Because everybody wants to know what the headline figure for November is. So put us out of our misery.
The headline figure for live values during November, which goes towards our December monthly values, is a 1.2% drop, which is equivalent to just over £200, £230, I think, on average. It is the first drop that we've seen in our live values since February. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is it's not a massive movement down, and it's the second most positive movement we've made going into a December since we introduced live values in 2012. So it's some normal seasonality is what we're calling it.
Yeah, and I mean, is it fair to say that dealers won't really be worried by a drop like this because they're so concentrating on getting cars, selling them to customers? A minor drop like this isn't going to be of any concern, really, is it?
It certainly shouldn't be. Really, if you think about a 1.2% drop, values actually went up by 1.2% last month. So all we've done really is undo what happened last month, which was off the back of months of increases. So values have still gone up by almost 30% over the course of the time since car showrooms reopened in April. Some retailers, we've had a lot of them contact us because they have seen demand drop, but they've got to look at that in context for previous years at this time, rather than looking at what's happened over the last few months, because demand has been unbelievable for the last few months. It's dropped away. It always happens this time of year. Consumers probably switch off making a big ticket purchase, concentrating on Christmas, and in our view, we'll probably be back in January, but it hasn't dropped off a cliff. Consumer demand is still there. It's just not quite as high as it has been over the last few months.
Yeah, and I suppose the expectation for it is demand is going to stay strong throughout Christmas, even though this year we've got all the added pressures compared to previous years of energy rates going up, all the different expenditure going up for consumers. People still need cars, and the demand is probably going to remain high, isn't it?
Yeah, I think demand will be okay. It will drop off as we head through December. It always does. A lot of used car outlets have sales starting from sort of Boxing Day onwards. They won't be reducing their prices much for those sales, and they don't need to, because I think that demand will come back. So yeah, there is a fair bit of negative sort of news, I guess, the economy and negative press, but I think used cars will remain strong because you can't get a new one still, or you can't get many new ones. The volumes are still dramatically down on those and likely to be for some time to come. So I think used cars, whilst we're seeing a seasonal dip, then the longer term picture is still positive.
I think it's also fair to say that high used car values, people are starting to become more aware of it, aren't they, consumers? I mean, it reached national headlines last week, high used car prices, because it was bundled in with the inflation figures as well. So a lot more people are becoming aware of this now. But like we've just said, people still want and need to buy cars, and people will just have to pay high prices, won't they?
Yeah, and the price of their cars has gone up, so they're aware of that. Obviously, it's very, very easy to find out what your car's worth now. And we have seen some reductions from some car buying services recently, but the long-term trend is still up. So they're getting more for their part exchange, and yes, they've got to pay more for a used car. But yeah, they are aware of it. It's been in the press, it's been on the news recently, as you say. So yeah, they're well aware of it, but also all they're doing is having to fund the difference between what they've made on their car or what they're getting for their car and what they've got to pay for a new one. And with sort of PCPs and various finance agreements, that it's not quite so much anyway. So they're doing all right.
Yeah. Looking ahead to the new year, I mean, do you think there may be a slight uptick in values, or do you think they could remain a little bit sort of plateaued?
I personally, I think probably plateau is the right sort of term, because they've gone up by so much that Can they keep going up? We always said it wasn't sustainable, and obviously that this month we are seeing a drop. We expect to see the same in December, with values to continue to drop. There might be, I mean, we talk about this on averages and in general terms. There's lots of moving parts within used car values. We've seen some go up, some go down this month, and that will probably be the same case in January. I would say plateauing is probably likely. It's a bit of a myth that values go up in January, really. They tend to be fairly even anyway, and you can get a bit of an uptick in February. So I think plateauing is probably more of the phrase. So probably drops for the next few weeks, and then stabilisation as we come out of Christmas.
Yeah. And what are you hearing? Are you hearing the same things that we're hearing from manufacturers, where they think this is going to be the semiconductor crisis is going to be well into, definitely affect the first half of the year and probably into the second half of next year as well? Yeah,
definitely. And for some, it's going to have an impact for a long time. You've got cars on huge lead times now for some. Different models are affected in different ways. There's been semiconductors that have been put into more profitable vehicles, or even to more profitable parts of the world. A third of them being diverted to America for SUVs rather than being used in the UK. So it will affect different models in different ways and different manufacturers in different ways. And certainly some manufacturers are in a better place than others. So it will be quite mixed. But overall, it's going to have an impact well into next year. And I would say it's definitely towards the end of next year, we'll still be seeing this impact.
Yeah. Derren, I have to be honest, it's quite nice to actually have something slightly different to talk about, really, with used car values, isn't it? As opposed to saying they're up, and up. Let's just drill down a little bit more into November. I mean, what kinds of things were you seeing? I mean, was demands for SUVs, are they still high? I mean, what have you been seeing?
The main sector that's seeing strongest demand is MPVs, which we have seen for the last few months, but no one would have predicted that. They were obviously seen as a bit of a dying sector, people preferring an SUV. But MPVs, they're actually level this month on average. Again, there's lots of moving parts within that, but they've performed the best. They probably got more. They look probably got. You can put the margin on top of the trade prices you're buying for those, and they still look reasonable versus an SUV. So they've done all right. SUVs themselves quite mixed there as well. Actually, we've seen some go up in value. The larger ones seem to have performed probably better. But we have seen some drops in that where there's more volume around in the medium and smaller SUVs. Part of that we feel is that because some of the larger used car outlets have come out of the market. They've bought previously, they're not really very active at the moment, and that's what they tend to buy because they move quite quickly on their forecourt. So they've kind of ducked out for now, apart from some selective buying. So that may have dropped some of the prices on those vehicles. So it's SUVs have done okay, but there's lots of differences within different models in there. Qashqais have come down, Cougars have come down, but others have gone up.
Yeah. Are there any particular models which across the sectors which have sort of you've made a note of that really stand out for you?
Electric vehicles in particular have stood out. We've seen the Ioniq, the Leaf, the I-Pace, they've all gone up this month. Certainly seems to be more consideration for electric vehicles now. They did drop last year, and they haven't come back up as quickly this year as petrol and diesel cars. So electric vehicles are certainly something to highlight. And I think we will probably see, as my electric vehicle editor has said, that the 2021 will probably be remembered for the year that electric vehicles became a lot more into consideration for the used car buyer. It's always been the new car buyer and for company cars with the taxation. But certainly with what's happened this year, there's been a lot more consideration for those. So those certainly stand out as performing well in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, recent events like the fuel crisis and COP26, and people, I think more people are just starting to consider electric cars a little bit more, and perhaps they're starting to think, well, actually, a used electric car does offer a good range, and that's probably why there's a bit more of an interest in electric cars at the moment. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think there's more of an awareness, isn't there, about sort of the environment. You mentioned the fuel crisis. I think fuel prices as well, which are an all-time high. That will certainly make you consider an EV. And yeah, COP26 has increased that as well. I think a few months ago we were saying, well, maybe people aren't considering it now. They're looking at it as maybe their next car after this one. But I think now people are definitely considering it and looking into the charging network and the range anxiety and the recharging anxiety. And people realise that car will work for them, maybe even as a second car, but certainly with the ranges increasing, definitely are well under consideration. And there's lots of sort of used car EV experts out there now that have sprung up over the last few years that can help consumers as well.
Yeah. Finally, Derren, I mean, one big thing this year, one thing that we've spoken to you a lot about and covered a lot is the used cars, which have been selling for higher prices than new. Is that still a thing, or is that starting to sort of drop off a little bit now?
No, it's still a thing. The prices are high. As I said earlier, we haven't reduced prices by too much this month overall. So yeah, there's still cars that are above list, and that will probably stay so for a while, especially while you can't get a new one. And yeah, prices have gone up by, as I say, almost 30% still. I think it's sort of 27%, something like that. So they've gone up by high amounts, and they're still high. You're not gonna see that reduce to the same degree that it went up. There will be some plateauing. There will be some small reductions and different reductions across different models and sectors and fuel types. But overall, prices are still really high compared to where they were a year ago or even 8-9 months ago.
Yeah. Always fascinating to chat, Derren, and really appreciate your time talking about November values. Look forward to talking to you next month. Thanks.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, James.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.